Did you know that students tend to forget up to 70% of course material within just a few days of their lesson, and then over 90% after a few months have passed? As an educator, it can sometimes feel like you're trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. I want to share some tactics today that can help avoid this decay by improving your students' engagement and ensuring that their new knowledge will actually stick and build upon itself. I'm Andrew with Brainscape, an adaptive flashcard study app built on decades of proven cognitive science research into how we learn better. Over the years, we've collected feedback from thousands of our top teacher and professor users about what gets students coming back to them years later and saying, "Thank you for setting me up for lasting success." And it all boils down to two sets of key strategies: managing students' attention and spaced repetition, with one bonus key third tactic that I'll share with you at the end. Let's start with managing students' attention. The first part of managing students' attention is to help them understand why what they're about to learn is important. Maybe start your lesson with a real-world example of how the knowledge might matter in an actual career. Paint maybe a short story with a protagonist that can only succeed or get out of danger if she happens to know the quadratic formula, and then you proceed to teach the quadratic formula. If that doesn't work, then maybe try a more superficial why, like, "I'm going to give a pop quiz on this in class tomorrow." And when you get groans, you could just remind your students that it's for their own good so that they won't have to study as hard for the bigger exam down the road. The point is that once your students' brains are primed with a bit of urgency or interest, they'll be ready for your next tactic to manage their attention, which is to make them seek the knowledge to fill in the gaps. Instead of you just instructing them the material through a lecture, try giving students a rough outline and then encouraging them to ask questions that fill in those gaps. Because if students are the ones who first ask the questions, rather than the instructor or book just dumping facts on them, then they are much more likely to remember the content going forward, and more importantly, they're much more likely to understand the content for a long period of time. One other idea is to have students work together in Brainscape to make flashcards for the subject that they're researching. You can maybe pair up 2 or 3 students to work together on a deck for one chapter or unit, and then by the end of the semester, you have a full student-generated set of study materials ready for them to study for the final exam. It's like they'll be getting a gift from a studious, time-traveling version of themselves. Which brings me to the second key strategy to enhance your students' retention of knowledge, which is spaced repetition. If you or your students have done the work to break down your material into bite-sized question and answer pairs, like flashcards, then you have a tool with which you can personalize how frequently each concept is repeated for each student, which the research shows is the most important factor in how well a concept will be remembered. This is Brainscape's raison d'être. We make spaced repetition easy by making it accessible on web and mobile, and by allowing students to customize the repetition pattern based on their own confidence rating in each flashcard. As an instructor, you can even use Brainscape to track your students' study habits and pinpoint their weaknesses so you can customize your own remedial attention just for the students who need it, really flipping the classroom to give you a more coach-like role rather than a lecturer role. Now, I promised you a third bonus strategy, and it's related to your role as a coach. That is to help students develop better study habits. And the way that you do that is to quiz your students as often and as cumulatively as possible. Instead of just a midterm and a final, what if you gave a short 2 to 3 question cumulative quiz once in a week? Or even just the prospect of a pop cumulative quiz that may or may not come in a given week. That might sound crazy and impractical. Your students would probably hate this idea at first, and honestly, it might take a few weeks to get the quizzing and grading really quick and efficient, maybe by having students quickly grade each other to feel like it's worth scaling. But if your students are using Brainscape to keep up all this time, all they have to do is just click the study button a couple times a week, and all the right flashcards from previous lessons are recycled in exactly the right interval based on how the student had rated their confidence the last time they saw the flashcard. Literally, just a few minutes of studying each week will keep your students perpetually ready for a cumulative test. This is proven by learning sciences and by our experiments. And by the time the final exam comes, your students will love you because they won't have to stress or cram for your final at all. The longer and more frequent you stretch those spaced repetitions over the course of a semester, the longer that knowledge will stick deeply into the future. Your students will see this, they will appreciate it, and those daily study habits will become the legacy that you leave your students with after they step outside of your classroom. Lastly, I wanted to thank you for your service as an educator and for everything that you do to instill strong values in the next generation. If you want to learn more about how you can improve student engagement and tons of other teaching hacks, remember to check out the Brainscape Academy, subscribe to this channel, and of course, go use Brainscape itself, all of which will help you to rise to your challenge.